Hello Vern, and welcome to Exposit The Word. Our question for today: what person or persons of the Trinity were the people of the Old Testament interacting with?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's a thing called progressive revelation where God does not reveal everything about himself all at once, but it's spread over time. And the climactic revelation of who God is, as well as what he does, is in the New Testament with the coming of Christ. So what about the Old Testament? And the fact is that God was always a Trinitarian God. So whenever people interacted with him, they were interacting with all three persons. Yeah. But the full revelation of the mystery of the Trinity hadn't yet to come. So you can see anticipations of the New Testament, but in order to have the full clarity of the doctrine, you have to go to the New Testament. I can illustrate that, for instance, with the doctrine of creation from Genesis 1. You read that, and the primary emphasis is surely on the fact that there is one true God who created everything. And that's a very necessary emphasis in the ancient Near Eastern world in which the Israelites lived, because most of the people were polytheists. They believed in many gods, and they believed in an interaction of the gods, and some of the mythological stories had explanations of how the world came to be, but it were gross explanations that involved fights between the gods or sexual intercourse between the gods. I mean, it's just blasphemous stuff. So you can see the importance of God straightening things out by saying, look, this is how it happened, one God. Yeah. But if you read carefully, and in the light of later revelation, you can see hints of a differentiation. For one thing, in verse 2 already, in the verse 1 is, in the beginning God created heavens and earth. Verse 2 says that the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. The Spirit of God. Well, who is that? What? Why is that expression there? Now, well, we know in the light of the New Testament that it's talking about a distinct person of the Trinity, but there's no further explanation in verse 2 of what is or who is, this Spirit of God, and how is he? Is there a distinction between the Spirit of God and God? It sounds like there is, but it's mysterious. The other thing is that God creates by speaking. So he says the first act after the world itself is made is he says, let there be light, and there was light. He speaks. So John in the New Testament then takes up on that and points out, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So there's two, at least, indications that he's alluding to the Genesis account. The words "in the beginning" make that pretty obvious, but then, in case you didn't notice, right, he goes to talk about the role of the Word in creation. Well, what's there in Genesis 1 that corresponds to that? It's this picture of God speaking, and the words that he speaks are in some sense distinct from God himself, because he didn't need to create what he created, right? He speaks in particular ways. So those three things, the mention of one God, and the mention of the role of the Word, and the mention of the presence of the Spirit of God, are, I believe, anticipation of the Trinity, but it's not all worked out. So I think that people are interacting with the Trinitarian God, but it's not as clear as it becomes in the New Testament. There's one other thing, namely that when God meets people, he sometimes appears in human form. Well, that's an anticipation of the incarnation, right? Where Christ actually he takes on human nature. He becomes man. Well, he didn't become man until he was conceived in the womb of the Virgin Mary, right? There's no incarnation in the Old Testament. And yet these appearances, they're temporary appearances they anticipate, they foreshadow what is to come. So that's another example of how people are meeting the Trinitarian God.